Hey, what is going on, everybody? Bauer Browner. Welcome back to the channel, guys, and welcome to another video. Well, as you can see, I am back inside of Blender again. I have a few things I want to go over here. Some of you guys have been requesting, well, lots of you guys have been requesting lots of different things, and I'm slowly trying to get to them as I can. Hasn't been so easy these days, but I'm trying. Anyhow, one of the things that you've been requesting is to go through like another Let's Build, maybe like build another garage or another house. And I'd like to do that. And I'd like to take you through the process from start to finish, right? So everything from how I lay out the house, even going on to like Google Earth or Google Street Maps and going down a street view and grabbing an actual image and building a house from that, right? Because my current map is a replica of a real life location, and that's what I'm doing, right? So I'm going in there and I'm going down the street view and I'm grabbing images and I'm rebuilding the houses in that area. So it depends on what type of garage or house, you're looking to build. But anyhow, I do want to do that series and walk you through my entire workflow, right? From start to finish, all the way up to texturing the house. Okay. But before we get into that, that's not going to be today's video. I apologize. But before we get into that, there are some things that I would like to go over quickly, just miscellaneous things that I think it's good to know in preparation for getting into a series like that, right? If you're going to maybe follow along and build your own house or what have you. All right. And a lot of what I'm going to go over today is going to answer some questions that you guys have had, right? So I'll try and hit this quickly and keep things moving along. All right, so one thing that I want to go over is the theme, right? The theme of Blender. So many people ask me, I get kind of bored of my theme every once in a while. I get tired of looking at the same old thing. So I like to change things up, right? Keep it interesting. If you're staring at this screen for as long as I do most days, or most weeks or what have you, it gets boring. So I like to keep it interesting. So yes, Blender does have themes, obviously. You see mine switch often enough. So you could switch this around, right? So if you up here to edit, go down to preferences, and right here, the second entry in this list here says themes, okay? At the very top here where it says presets, all right, you can go through here and pick any Blender theme, like a preset theme that you would like, right? So I've tried a few of them. I think this deep gray, I kind of like. That one's okay. Maya, I've played with once or twice. This isn't so bad. It's okay. But the one I'm using right now is Moto. I kind of like this one. It works for me. All right. But on top of that, you can go through any of these other settings here, and you can change literally every aspect of Blender, right? I mean, anything. If you can think of it, it is in here and you can change it. So you can create your own theme if you want to, right? You can go through and, I don't know, until your heart's content, you can just go through and change things willy-nilly until you find something that works perfect for you. All right. So that covers themes. Why does my Blender always look so different? That's why. All right. The next thing I want to go over is concerning themes. There's certain things like when you guys come into your Blender, right? So you start up a new file, you're going to start working on a house or whatever your awesome project is for this week. All right, there's certain things that you normally change, right? So maybe you don't like working with metric, you like working with imperial. So one of the first things you do is you come over and you switch it to imperial. And I like to have my statistics on screen, so maybe you like that. Maybe you don't like the grid. Every once in a while it gets in my way, so I start getting rid of the grid. I get rid of the floor. I'll get rid of the axes. You can get rid of everything altogether if you want to. You can just turn the whole thing off, just like so. I do that often enough, right? So it depends. I've turned these things off and on depending on what I'm working on. So every time you come into Blender, right, instead of having to go through and make these changes every single time, is there a way to just like set your default settings. And yes and no. There is a way, but it's not just default settings so much. All right. So what you want to do is start yourself up a brand new file, Go into like a new project, right? So just go to new, general. Don't move anything. Don't touch anything. Leave everything just the way it is. Well, I guess it doesn't really matter. But what you want to do from there is go and make those changes that you normally make, right? So maybe go over to change your units to Imperial if you like working with Imperial. All right, maybe go up top and turn on your statistics if you like having those on. All right, so you're following what I'm getting at here, right? So make all the changes that you typically like to make, right? The first things you always do with every project, and the way that you would like to see Blender every time you start it. All right, so go through right now and make those changes. All right, and when you're done, come back up to edit, or I'm sorry, go to File, right down here at the bottom where it says defaults, and then just click on Save Startup File. All right, so and basically what that did is took a snapshot of the way you have Blender set up right now, and the next time you start into a new project, it will start up that way. You no longer have to go through and make all those changes, and easy enough. All right, some things I take for granted that I'm like, oh, that was easy. And I just take it for granted that everybody knows these things, and that's not always the case. Not everybody does know these things, right? So a lot of you guys have been asking, and now you have your answer. Okay. The next thing I would like to get into is asset libraries. All right. This is something that comes in extremely handy as you're working on your projects. All right. It's something I fall back on pretty often. Especially now, like I'm doing the houses. I'm doing all of the deco houses for my map, right? And with every house, there's objects that you keep having to remake over and over and over and over and over, besides the house itself. Every house has doorknobs and windows and what have you, right? So there's things that you're constantly remaking. Some of these items are easy to just make on the fly right there on the spot, and some of them are a little more tedious and time consuming, and they're a pain in the ass. You don't want to have to do that every time, right? So I'm sure most of you guys have seen asset libraries that are out there and that are like maybe Blender Kit or something like that, and that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your own assets, right? Things that you've built. Maybe it's a special doorknob or a particular window. All right, well, you can build that once, save it, and then just keep reusing that object over and over. Just drag it into your scene, and you don't have to keep rebuilding it, right? Awesome. So yes, there is a way to do that. You can create your own asset library. All right, so I'll show you how to do that now. So let's start with this cube. I'm just going to turn it into something really, really simple, and I'm going to use it as an example. All right, so let's give this cube a material. You know what? Let's just give it a color. I don't want to get too crazy with this. All right, so we'll give it a color. Let's see if that color stayed. Okay, so we have a blue cube. All right, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to name this blue cube. All right, now let's say, that says cube, blue cube. Not what I was looking for. Let's try that. Blue cube. Okay, so now let's, for example, say that this blue cube, it is the object that I want to have in my asset library. You can see how difficult it was to make. I don't want to have to do this every time. Every single project, making this blue cube and giving it a color, just too much work. Don't want to have to do that. I just want to save it to my asset library, and that's that. All right. So if you go up to your blue cube here in your scene collection, right click on it. And in that list, there is an entry there for mark as asset. Okay, so click on that, and that's it. You're done. Well, you kind of are, but you're not. What this does, you're halfway there. All right, so it is an asset. If you go into your asset library right now, all right, so if you go to your your asset browser, pull that up so we can see it. You can see that blue cube is in here, right? It should be one of my unassigned assets. So right there it sits. Now, you're halfway there. And what I meant by that is that by marking this as an asset, it's only good for this particular project, right? So if you start another project, you're building a different house, a different garage, what have you, that blue cube will not be available to you in that project. All right. And I know you're probably asking yourself, well, what the hell? What good is that? It depends. Some projects, have maybe distinct items in there, particular items that are, like I said, they're distinct to that project that you wouldn't necessarily be reusing those certain items in all of your projects, but you do use them over and over in one particular project. And that's what that's for, right? So if you're working on, maybe it's a super huge scene and, you have assets that you're really only ever going to use in that one project, well, that's what you can do. You can mark them as an asset and save it for that project, okay? But now in our case, if you want to use this fancy blue cube over and over in other projects, all right, there is also a way to do that. So if you go up to Edit, Preferences, at the very bottom here on the left-hand side, you can see something that calls File Paths, all right? On the bottom of that, you'll see Asset Libraries. Now, what I did in my case is right here, this path, this is your default user library, all right? And your path is probably set to something a little bit different. All right, what I did is I just gave it a new path, right? Something easier for me to work with where I know where I can find those, these assets. It's easy for me to get to. It's easy for me, to remember where it is. You get the idea. If you want to keep the default, you can just add whatever library you want, okay? And so what you need to do is you need to find a folder, where do you want your library to be, okay? So let's pick a folder, like I have mine here in Blender, right? And then I have the very top, my top folder there says Asset Library, okay? And in there I have one for materials, one for models, all right? So you can have both, right? So you can bring both of those in here. Now, you don't necessarily need to split them up inside of your folder here, right? You could have just one folder for everything. But I'm a little bit anal, so I like to split mine up. And the reason you don't have to is because in Blender, right, in your asset library here, you can give them different categories and different catalogs just so you can organize it within Blender. All right, but if you want to be organized, on the back end also, you can split them up and make your own folders. All right, and then once you make that folder, you just hit the plus sign and then go and find it, right, and tell it, okay, this is where my asset library is. All right, it's in, here, and then I go into Blender, and then here's my asset library. All right, and then just click Add. It might want the folder like this one, like Models or Materials. So I'll click Models and then click Add. All right. And then I think you would give it a name. Like this one here says Models. All right. But I just have the, like I said, I just reuse the default library. Okay. So that's the way that's done. Now, every model that you work on, like this blue cube here, if I want this to be available, all right, what I need to do is I need to save it. I'll go down to Save As. All right, so go to Save As, and I need to save it in that location, right? So you can't just save it anywhere. It has to be in that folder, in that asset library that we had just created, right? So I want to save it, go into Blender, Asset Library, Models, and then I can save the blue cube in here, okay? Blue cube, okay? So we save that. Now, if I open up another project, all right, let's just open up, let's see if we got something recent in here. All right, so let's take whatever this was. Ooh, this one's done. All right, so somewhere in this project here, okay, I want to use that blue cube. I think it would look good in here somewhere, maybe sitting on the porch, okay? What I want to do from there is go into my asset library. All right, so go into Layout, You do need to be in object mode, by the way, if you're going to bring these assets into your scene. All right, so open up your asset browser. All right, now you can see I have a couple things in there. I have, doorknobs, windows. I don't have any, but I do have rails, lattice, things like that. These are things that are just a pain in the butt for me to keep recreating over and over. All right, and now once you're in object mode, you can grab that blue cube and drag it in. All right, and then just set it anywhere in your scene that you want it to go. Now, the nice thing is, let me go back into that blue cube really quick. I'm going to get rid of that because I don't actually want this in that scene. All right, you can right click and you can open the actual blend file. So maybe you're working on your project and you're like, something's wrong with that asset, right? So you can open up that file, right there on the spot, go into the blend file, make the changes that you need to make, and then it'll propagate over to your current project that you're working on. You may have to right click it and like reload the asset, but not a big deal. All right. But once you're in here, the way that you want this to show up in your scene, you want to make all those changes in here as far as like unwrapping it, mark all of your seams if you want to unwrap it, give it its color, make sure that it's, make sure the scale is set. I drew a blank, it's scale and stuff like that. Make sure that's all set up properly. So everything is done and it'll save you that little bit of work once you get it into your scene. All right. So also, while you're in here, now this doesn't necessarily need to be done inside of here, but you can actually put this in one of your categories, right? So maybe if you want this inside of doorknobs, right, you can put it inside of there. So it's no longer in unassigned, it's in my doorknobs now, but we'll keep that back in unassigned. All right, you can also start a category here, right, if you want to. You cannot see where it says all right here. You have to have that on like a user library like that. Then you can create your own category there and you can call that cube. Okay. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So set it up the way you want it, put in a category if you need to. And then that is it. Now, for some reason, if you do not want this as an asset, like maybe you used it for a while and you decide you don't like it anymore. All right. Obviously you can right click on it again. And you can clear the asset so it's no longer, in your scene. And that's mostly handy if, you only have it as an asset in one particular project. All right. And that will just remove it from your library. But if you no longer want it in your user library, like in your main library there, right? What you would need to do is go back into your mod or your asset library where you have it saved, and you would need to move it out of this location, right? Now, I don't believe if you go into Blender here, yeah, there's no way to actually remove it from here. You would just need to remove it from the folder, right? From your, like right here. Now, here's the thing. If you remove it as an asset, right? Now, I think it's not marked as an asset. No, I didn't save it though. I should have kept that open. I think when I right clicked it and I cleared it as an asset, it may have also cleared it in here. I'm not entirely sure on that one. Let's try open it up one more time again and see. This time I'll save it instead of not saving it. All right, so let's right click it, clear asset, and except this time I'll actually save it. Oh yeah, it did. Okay, so that's nice. So it does disappear from your entire library, okay, which is good. But the only problem, like I said, is it's still here inside of your assets folder. Not a big deal, I guess. And for a lot of people, it wouldn't be a big deal, but maybe it's taking up room and you don't want that, right? You want it out of here. So now you need to decide whether you actually want it in here taking up room, or you just want to delete it, or do you want to move it to another folder? All right. So from here, just figure out what you want to do with it, and then you're good to go. Where is my, I guess that's it. And in this case, I don't want the blue cube, so I'm just going to delete it and let that be that. All right. So like I said, that comes in really, really handy. depending on, what you want to work on. So my doorknobs are easy. I rebuild those. I build those on the spot, like every single time. Windows, I did think about doing, only because they're not hard. They're just kind of a pain sometimes. But the things that I do have in here is like these rails, like this vertical curve. This is a real pain to have to do every single time. And you could see why, right? So see how, loopy it is. And this is just a railing. It's a piece of a railing that you would find on a lot of, I don't want to say modern homes, but a lot of homes have this type of rail. And that's what the other thing is too. It's a twisted rail that you would normally see like as part of the railing, right? And I don't want to have to keep rebuilding that every time. Every time I want to use something like that, I don't want to have to rebuild it. Too much of a pain. So I just throw it in my asset library, right? And it works out really, really well. Okay, so that's it. That is your asset library. Easy enough. Nothing difficult about it. And I'm sure you guys are going to find, that's very, very useful thing to have. All right, so I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to start a new file. All right, and I'm not going to save that. Okay, so the next thing I want to go over is working with reference images. All right, so depending on what you're working on, it doesn't have to be houses. It could be characters. It could be any number of things. You can work with reference images, right? And it makes it a lot easier. So if you're not good at building things out of your head, you have a sucky imagination, I don't know, whatever the issue is. Me personally, I think it's easier to work off of like a photo. Not always, I do like making things out of my imagination, and I do it often. But like now, like I said, my current map, all of these houses that I have on here, right? These houses, they're all, in that location, in that area, in that town. This house is sitting in this spot. All right. So it's easier for me to just go on the Google Street View, take a picture of that house, grab a screenshot, and then bring it back into Blender and start building that house. All right. I don't recommend it. Not on a large scale. I got a little out of hand. I do recommend it. I mean, for lots of things, but I don't recommend recreating an entire town. I just, I don't want to say I'm sorry I did, but I kind of am. All right. So like I said, working with images is real nice. Now, these reference images, you can do a lot more with it. Like if you go into Google here, you can see they have like character images, and you can do, they'll give you like a front view, a side view, a top view, a back view. So you can really, build up this character or the house or whatever you happen to be working on. And you can really get into it because you can see it from every angle, right? So you can set that up inside of Blender. Now, the first and probably the most, I don't want to say the easiest, but we'll go through this really quick. You can, when you shift A and go down to images, right? When you want to add an image, okay, down here to add images, images as planes. I'm sorry, it went away really quick. That's my fault. But if you need to enable that as an add-on, so if you go up to edit, go down to preferences, right? And go up to your add-ons and just search for images, right? Search images, and you'll see an add-on there called import export images as planes. Now this comes in handy, depending on what you're working on. It comes in handy for every now and then. I've used it a bunch, so it just depends on what you're working on. You'll find that, it just, in one case or another, that's what you need. It's just an image as plane. It doesn't need anything, anything crazy. Like maybe if you're working on, if you look at this one here, I think this is a floor plan, right? And this is kind of what I'm talking about, like these the reference images for the houses. There is a way that you can make I think Archimesh does it. There's a way that you can take a floor plan for a house, and as you trace it out, you can build up those walls. So maybe you're doing the type of like prefab or placeable, like one of those houses that you can walk inside and walk around. Well, that's kind of how it would be done. You'd take an image as plane, right, and you would import it and you would just lay it down flat, and then you would start building on top of it. All right, so that's one way to do it. It's not the only way, but that's one way to do it. So just keep that in mind, that image as plane. All right, so it definitely has its uses. All right, so the next thing that we see here is when you shift A, you have reference image and a background image. Now, they're basically the same thing. There's very, very small differences, right? And I think it just has to do with placement. But for the most part, there's very little that separate those two, right? They're pretty much the same. But we want to click reference image either way, because that's what we're doing is reference image, right? So I'll go back into downloads. I think I have a house in here. All right. So when I load this image up, all right, so this is the house that I just grabbed this off of Google. And I believe this is actually somebody else's like Blender model, actually. But when you look at the way it brought it in, you'd be surprised at how many videos I've seen where the guys are like, oh, it always brings it in crooked, and then they're trying to straighten it out and, line it up the best they can. And that's not necessarily what you want to do. All right, so depending on what view you plan on using that image, right? So if this is my front view, then get yourself in front view before you even bring that image in, all right? So delete that. I'm going to press number 1 on my keyboard, and I'm going to get myself into front orthographic. And then I'm going to add my image, my reference image, all right? So go back to downloads. All right, so now when you look at it, it is perfectly lined up in your front view. All right, now the difference between, and this may not be the sole difference, I'm not sure, I have to look here. Let me bring a cube in here real quick. Okay, now one of the differences is, let me go to image quick, not that image. Click on the image. All right, you can see here that there is you see this depth inside. All right, so that's basically where you want that image to show up in relation to your cube. The default, it kind of splits the difference. You can see it in the front and the back. Front, the image is only visible in front of the cube. Actually, my cube is kind of weird. It's freaking me out how it's doing that. But it's there. It's behind it. But every time I look, it's on the other side. And then, of course, there's back, where it's always on the back side. And the way that would make a difference is you could actually just lower the opacity on your image. So it's up to you. It's up to you how you like to work with it. All right. And then from here, once you're in orthographic mode, right, you would just get yourself on the cube. All right. And, you could, you move this cube around, manipulate it any way that you feel like you need to, right? So you can stretch this out. Stretch this out to the other side, like on the corner, and you bring the top up to where you think that needs to go. All right. So when you look at it, that's basically what you're doing, right? Is you're looking at the image and you're just manipulating your cube or your, whatever object you happen to have, to get it into the shape of that house. And it makes it much, much easier. Now, the only problem with this is, like I said, it's doesn't give you, you're only at the front view. You don't really have like any depth to it. Now, that's why I happen to pick this certain picture, because it does have kind of a side view, so I can get a feel for the depth. But then the problem there is you're not really straight front on, right? So it's kind of messing you up. You do need a side view. You need, a top, not a top view, but it helps to have like a left and right side view. And in that case, when you bring those images in, you would just get yourself in, like now I am in right orthographic, or you can get yourself into left orthographic. And then you bring those images in when you're in that mode. Now, for this one, for this front orthographic, you could actually move this, right? So you can grab this image and you can move it along the Y. Oops, not that one, the image. Let me click on it. There we go. So you can move that along the, like the Y axis there, and then it'll show up this way. And then you would do the same thing with your right and your left, and you would just space them out. Now, you would have to maybe adjust the scale So they're all exactly the same size. Maybe one image is a little bit bigger than the other one, because you don't want to have the left side of your house be bigger than the right side. That would just look foolish. But then, like I said, you get yourself in the front orthographic and just start building, right? And then when you want to, you can just, switch over to, your right, and then your image is already there, and you just keep building the right side of your house. All right. So it makes it really, really easy. It makes it easy for a lot of things. Now, I've used this on some things. I think I built like a gas meter, maybe a fire hydrant or something. I've used that method for, and for obviously for houses, like the front view is really easy, but trying to get the depth and the side views, maybe not so much. So I use an add-on for that, right? And the add-on that I use is called Perspective Plotter, right? And it makes it, oh my God, it makes it so easy. It does make it easy. I don't want to say so easy, but it does. But it gives you, like I said, the perspective, and you need to, I'll show you the image. It's the same image that I used there before. All right. And if you go to, let's go back to Firefox there for a second. All right. And if you go to Blender Market, let's go to Blender Market really quick. I'll put the link in the description, by the way. All right, you can find it there. I think it's Perspective Plotter. We'll put that in here. Just type in Perspective Plotter. And this is based off of another application, right? And this is it here. So $18 it's a paid add-on, unfortunately. But it's based off of a program called FSpy. And now FSpy is free if you want to try that. It is a standalone application though. FSpy is. Perspective Plotter is not. And you can see what they're doing here in Perspective Plotter, right? Where you can just literally, it's so nice the way you can do buildings. But this is what I personally use. All right. So inside of Blender, what I would do is I get myself, let's see, let's start a new scene just for the heck of it. Start a new scene. All right. And then I click on camera. I get myself on camera. And on the right-hand side there where it says data, I'm going to click on background images, add an image, and I'm just going to go and find the image that I want to use. All right, so here I would have this one that I just had opened up. Now you can see it made some changes here, but nothing, like really changed. I'd have to press 0 on my keypad, and that gets me into my camera view. All right, now on my add-ons here, Perspective Plotter does not show up until you're in this camera view. And once you're in there, now most images, when you get into Perspective Plotter, this match background is lit up in red. This one, I thought it was kind of funny that it didn't light up for me. I'm like, why? It's like normally they're not quite in perspective and you have to match it. And I keep forgetting that somebody built this in Blender, so everything's already perfect. You don't have to do anything with it. All right. But anyhow, what you would do in this case, like say this is an image that I just grabbed off of Google Street View, I'd hit plot perspective, and then I would just take these vanishing points here. There's a red set and a green set, even though there's the red set. All right. And you would move those into like along one of your edges. You would find a completely straight edge, something that is a straight edge. All right. And you would move these down. These are your vanishing points. This is what gets your house into perspective. All right. And when I build my houses this way on any one of my maps, well, not any one, I'll say like on this one in particular. All right. I have what's called a photo layer, right? And this is how I work on things. So I can drag this up and, I can see where all the houses go and, all the trees and the fields and stuff like that. When I build a house this way, right, and I drag it onto my map, it fits exactly over that image, because that's how it works, right? You built it, using this perspective, and as long as you scale it properly, the house is it's scaled identically, and that's what I really like about this. All right, so like I said, you just kind of match yourself up to straight lines that you see here. If you decide that you want to go down this road and use something like Perspective Plotter, I recommend that you go to their website, because this thing does so much. like I'm probably not even using it correctly. I know that it does a lot more than what I'm actually doing with it, right? So there is a third vanishing point, so you can get like a vertical vanishing point. Like if you have something that's a known height, you can match this up. Like, I don't know, maybe you match it up to the sides or something. I'm not sure how it works. I don't really want to mess with it. But like, say you can take like 2 vertical points, that would be maybe your 2 sides. Not sure. I probably got this completely wrong. But that's kind of how that would work. You would need CNC invalid configuration. You would need to like really read the instructions for it. Like I said, it does a ton. But like I said, go through, read everything, go to their website, read up on it, learn how to use it. It's really not hard. If you're using it like I am, just kind of dragging things into perspective is really easy. But what it ended up doing for you here now is, now that, you have all your perspective set up, is this cube is oriented exactly as the house sits, right? So all I would need to do from there is, get myself into edit mode. Oops. And, I'm not in edit mode, duh. And then I just start dragging out my, faces, right? So bring this down. Now it takes a little bit of tweaking. I got to do it more than once. So I'd bring this down to the bottom, and then I'd bring this out to the side. And in my top, I would bring down to where I feel like that needs to be, like somewhere in there. Maybe the front. Nope, that looks pretty good. Actually, no, the front needs to go in more, I think. So I bring the front so that corner matches up. And you bring the side out, and you keep doing this until you got it exactly lined up, right? So the corners match the corners, the front, back, and sides all match. Maybe the bottom is, is lined up with the bottom of the house. And then you would just start marking out your doors and windows, and, and you can do that either by using, like, making loop cuts. You can do loop cuts to make, set your windows, or your knife tool, or whatever you need to do, to get things. That you'll find that it's a lot easier working with these, once you have this set up. And you can see now, this is exactly the dimensions of the house. It's set up perfectly. All you need to do is scale. Once you scale this properly, it'll be the exact dimensions of this house, right? And I can't figure out an easier way to do it than this, or at least a more helpful way to do it anyhow. Now, the images that you need to grab an image that has a bit of a front view and a side view, like something that looks from the corner, right? That's the easiest to work with. All right. If you're using just a front on, then you don't even really need perspective plotter. But that's what makes it super duper easy for me, right? Now, once I'm done, there's a way, this just came up recently too, on how I scale my images. All right. Now we're going to take this, and I'm going to just scale it on the x-axis like so. I'm going to turn this into like a quick doorway. All right. Like so. All right. Now, normally this doorway, I would have used like the actual image when I laid out this doorway, right? Like right in here, I would have, everything would be lined up, and it would look, it would be to the exact dimensions that it is on my image, right? Now, I don't know how tall it is, right? I don't know, I'm just building it to look exactly like the image. But that's the thing. That's how I scale it, because I work off of a known height, right? So there's lots of things that have like an industry standard, and one of them is your doors, right? So most doors, not just in this country, in most countries, are roughly the same size. All right. And especially here in the US, I know it's around 80 inches, like 2,040 centimeters, something like that. All right. So, and then we're talking just the door itself, not to the outside of the trim. Like if I had trim on this doorway right here, all right, let's add some trim to it. All right. I wouldn't measure from, the ground level up to here. I'd measure just the inside, the door itself. Okay. Now, what I do is, let's just say that this house is completely built up. Everything's ready to go, looking good. All right. The way that I do it, I'm just going to show you the way that I do it. It's another add-on but it's free and it's already bundled with Blender. All right, so just go up to add-on or go up to edit preferences and then go to your add-ons and then type in measure, MEA, well, you know how to spell measure. All right, and you're looking for measure it. All right, so get that clicked or get that, get that installed. You can tell it's starting to get late and I'm getting loopy. All right, so once it's installed, you want to go down to view. All right, and at the very bottom there, you'll see measure it tools. Now, what you need to do is get yourself an edge select and select an edge that takes up that door, like that door jamb. Now, if it's broken into two pieces, like maybe you have something going across the middle of your door there, don't worry about it. I'll show you how to do that also. But you want to grab that door or grab that edge that's as tall as your door, no shorter, no taller. It needs to be exactly the height of your door. All right, so you grab that or highlight it, and then you want to go to segment and then click on show. Now it comes up blue, and I find it hard to read. So you can change the color down here, change it to like green. Now it's 1.83 meters. All right, well, I don't like it in meters. I want it to read in inches because I'm shooting for about 80 inches. All right, so if I go down here to units, I can change that to anything I want, and we'll put it on inches. Now that's already at 71 inches. All right, this is actually the second time I did this video, and the first time it came out to exactly 80, which I thought was impressive because, like I said, the guy that did this was a Blender model, right? And he scaled it the way he needed to. So, of course, this door was exactly 80 inches. I know, not as interesting to you as it was to me probably, but I thought it was. I'm like, wow, 80 inches on the nose, nonetheless, not 80.01. It was 80 inches. Anyhow, all right, so once I get it here, right, so once I have, my measurement highlighted, you want to make sure, well, actually, I guess you don't really need to make sure at this point. I would get into my object mode, and I would just scale it, right? I would scale this until it reads 80 inches, all right? And then once I get to 80 inches, you might have to fine-tune it in there, right? So once I get there, then I would just go into Control A, and then I would set my scale, right? And then that's it. I'm scaled exactly as high as I need to be, right? Because you need a known height. Now, lots of things have known heights. You could do the width. I don't really recommend the width, but you get, you see what I'm saying, right? So I personally always use the door, and then I use the same object in every one of my builds, and then I know, the rest of my houses are going to have some uniformity, you know what I mean? That I'm using the same object every time, that not one house is going to be a hair bigger than another. And, they're all scaled the same way. All right. And it's a real life scale. It's a 1-to-1 scale at this point because you've used a known height, right? A known distance. All right. Now, for some reason, like maybe you have this door split up, right? For whatever reason, maybe just a design or something that you have in a door, and you don't have an easy way. You can't pick one edge. You can pick two of them, but you can't pick one. And if you pick two of them, you can see what will happen here. If you click on segment, it'll break it down into two pieces for you. And that's not really helpful. All right. Well, it is, but what you want to do, I'll show you the way you want to do it. Get both of your segments highlighted. All right. And then on here, on your measure it, right where it says sum, you want to pick any one of these letters, one that's not currently being used. So we'll say we'll click A. All right. Have both of our segments highlighted. Click segment and show. All right. Now you got the same thing, but if you scroll down here now, you'll see that we now have totals, and it's group A. You can see that group A, we have 80.02 inches. So it adds these two up. Right? So we got 40 inches and 40 inches. And there you go. All right. So that's the way you would do it. So as many segments as you need to highlight to get up to the full height of your door, you just want to use this sum up here. You got to click that first, though. It took me a little bit of goofing around to get the hang of this. But like I said, you want to click sum first, right? Before you do any of this other stuff. Give it a category, A, B, C, whatever. Then click your segment, then click show, and everything will show up. All right. And that's how I scale my houses. All right. So not much to it. And it comes in extremely handy. Uh, I know different guys out there probably have different ways of scaling their stuff, and that's fine. I'm just telling you the way that I do it. The perspective plotter, I can't recommend that enough, especially if you're going to build a house that's, based off a real image. It gets you nuts on as far as, dimensions and stuff like that. You have to scale it properly, but you're right on. And it works out really, really nice. All right. So I think those are just a handful of things that are going to be extremely beneficial for you guys somewhere down the road. I did want to split that up. I was going to do a whole video just on add-ons that I think are helpful and things like that. But I just want to get this out there now because probably pretty soon one of the next series I'm going to be doing is going to be that building that house. All right. From start to finish. And like I said, I just think that's, worth knowing before we get there. Alrighty. So we're already on 45 minutes. I'm not going to drag this out anymore. Hopefully you found that helpful in one way or another. If you did, remember to like and subscribe. It helps me out, helps you out, keeps the content coming. And with that being said, I'm Bauer Brown, and I'll see you on the next one.